I did not argue when my wife laughed and told me I would leave our marriage with nothing. I smiled. That should have warned her. Not the threat, the smile. Because men who are cornered usually do one of three things. They beg, they bargain, or they get loud enough to feel brave. I did none of that. I just stood in the middle of our kitchen and looked at the woman I had spent 6 years loving, 2 years doubting, and 1 long month quietly watching. My name is Evan Mercer, and this is my story. My wife, Dr. Helena Vale, had just come home from a charity gala in a dark green evening gown, diamond studs, and the kind of exhaustion that made her honesty slip faster than usual. One heel had already been kicked halfway across the kitchen. Her makeup was mostly intact, her face was not. If this marriage fails, she said, laughing once like the outcome had already been priced, you'll walk away with nothing. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming behind her, the rain against the windows, the little drop of white wine clinging to the rim of her glass. Funny what the mind keeps when the heart starts breaking in real time. You know that feeling, right? I folded my sleeves once and said, "That sounds fair." Her smile froze, only for a second, but I saw it. Helena had expected outrage, or panic, maybe pleading. What she had not expected was agreement, because agreement is dangerous when you think you own the board. She set her glass down on the marble island and stared at me properly now. You think this is a joke? No. Then why are you smiling? I'm not. That made her angrier. I was smiling. Enough for her to know that something in the room was no longer moving according to her design. And that bothered Helena more than almost anything. Control had become her favorite religion long before I married her. It was in the way she arranged dinner parties, the way she corrected waiters, the way she never asked a question if she thought a statement could do more damage, the way she treated uncertainty like an infection to be removed. Tonight, though, she was tired. Tired people tell the truth faster. That was why the mask had slipped. We had been circling this conversation for weeks. Not directly. People like Helena never walk straight toward conflict when they can design a hallway first. It started with questions about account structures, about title positions, about how quickly post-separation liquidation usually happened in our state. Questions asked lightly, casually, as if she were just making conversation while removing earrings in the mirror. I answered carefully. Then came the colder kisses. The phone turned face down more often. The late shifts that didn't feel like shifts. The way she had stopped saying our house and started saying the house without noticing. Then, 2 weeks earlier, I found the email preview. Before I tell you how it all begun, let me ask you, have you ever experienced something like this from your partner? Then you must understand what I was going through. Tell me how your situation was in the comment section and give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe if it is your first time of seeing our video and turn on your notification to get notified when next we drop another great story. Thank you. Now let me tell you how it all begun. Helena, my wife, was too disciplined for sloppy mistakes. She had asked me to print a conference itinerary from her tablet while she was in the shower, and a message preview slid down at the top of the screen before I could avoid seeing it. From Aaron Pike. Subject: once this is over. Just 5 words in the preview. Once this is over, more than enough to wake me up. Aaron Pike was another surgeon at St. Catherine's, cardiothoracic, polished, tall, confident in the expensive, effortless way that comes from never hearing no from anyone who mattered. I had met him twice. Both times he shook my hand like he was already measuring the softness of it. The first time he said, "So you're the finance guy." That told me everything I needed to know about him. Helena had once told me Aaron came from one of those old money families that still sat on hospital boards and donated wings with their names carved in stone. At the time, she said it with amusement. Later, I realized it had sounded more like admiration. So when I saw that preview, I did not confront her. I printed the itinerary, put the tablet back exactly where she had left it, and said nothing, because accusations are gifts when you do not yet know the size of the betrayal. They warn people. They make them careful. I had no interest in making Helena careful. I wanted her comfortable. Comfortable people make expensive mistakes. Tonight felt like one of them. She leaned back against the island and crossed her arms. You're being very calm for someone who should be more concerned. Concerned about what? Don't do that. Do what? Pretend you don't understand the conversation. That almost made me laugh, because the truth was, I understood this conversation better than she did. I had understood it the moment I realized Helena had started speaking to me like a woman calculating exits, not protecting a marriage. What exactly do you think I should be concerned about? I asked. Her mouth tightened. You know how this works. No, I said softly. I know how you think it works. That landed. Outside, rain slid down the glass walls overlooking the yard. Beyond them, the city glowed in a blur of silver and red. We lived high enough above the street that storms looked expensive from our kitchen. Helena had chosen this house. 5 bedrooms. Glass everywhere. The kind of place architects call restrained and rich people call tasteful when they want praise for spending money without looking vulgar. She loved telling guests how we found it. What she left out was that I wired the deposit in under 20 minutes while she was still thinking about it. Back then, she called me decisive. Later, she started calling me lucky. Funny how vocabulary changes when respect begins to rot. I'm trying to be practical, she said. There it was. Practical. That word always appears when cruel people want credit for sounding organized. I nodded. Of course. She pushed off the island and took 2 steps toward me. You've had a good life with me, Evan. At 38, I had built the kind of reputation that never made magazine covers but kept people richer than magazine covers. I specialized in urban investment strategy, quiet acquisitions, repositioning old properties, building cash flow through patience while louder men chased headlines and debt. I was not flashy. That was part of the problem. People like Helena trusted surfaces too much. A surgeon marries a finance man who dresses well, speaks carefully, drives understated cars, and never brags. In her mind, that meant stable, comfortable, successful enough to be respectable, not powerful enough to be dangerous. She stopped a few feet away. You enjoyed the house, the travel, the life. You've benefited from being with me. The words sat between us like a blade laid flat on white cloth. Clean, cold, designed to look reasonable from a distance. I looked at her for a long moment. You really believe that? It's true. No, I said. It's convenient. Her laugh this time had less humor in it. You know what? That's exactly the kind of evasive answer I'm talking about. I tilted my head. Evasive. Yes, you always hide behind tone. That was interesting. Because people often accuse you of the very thing they are doing. Helena had hidden behind tone for years, behind polish, behind exhaustion, behind prestige, behind the glow of a woman saving lives, as if excellence at work automatically made her good everywhere else. I knew better now. Work reveals discipline. Marriage reveals character. And Helena's character was beginning to show itself in clean, surgical cuts. Maybe, I said, I just don't enjoy ugly conversations as much as you do. Her chin lifted. You think this is ugly? I think a wife talking about how little her husband would leave with if the marriage collapsed is not exactly romantic. Don't be dramatic. There it was again. Insult first, then downgrade the reaction. I had seen her do it to residents, nurses, even her younger sister. Cut, then control the bleeding. I looked at the clock above the oven. 10:50. Right on time, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. Not loudly, just once. Enough to shift the room. Helena's eyes flicked toward it, then back to me. I walked past her, picked up the phone, and looked at the screen. Mason Cole, my accountant. He almost never called at night unless something mattered. I answered calmly. Mason. Sorry for the hour, he said, but I think you need this now. My eyes lifted to Helena. She stood motionless by the island, trying to look unaffected and failing by inches. Go ahead. There was a records request this afternoon from counsel linked to Vale's firm, Mason said. Broad but sloppy. They pulled current household exposure, jointly held distributions, and visible investment entities. What they did not pull was the pre-marital city portfolio archive. I said nothing. He continued, I checked the request path twice. Her people missed the legacy file. There it was. The sentence that changed everything. I leaned against the counter. Which file? The Mercer Urban Holdings Archive, he said. The original one. The portfolio established 7 years before you met Dr. Vale. Downtown commercial positions, 3 medical office buildings, minority hospital adjacent retail, the River District parking structures, and the old syndicate units rolled into Mercer City Partners. Helena's face changed. Not because she could hear Mason clearly, she couldn't, but because she knew me well enough to read stillness, and I had gone very still. Mason lowered his voice. I'm sending the full documentation now. Formation records, acquisition timeline, beneficial ownership confirmations, and the separation wall from marital integration. Clean chain. Very clean. My thumb tapped once against the back of the phone. How badly did they miss it? Badly enough that if their strategy assumed those assets were marital or post-marital growth attached to joint living, they built it on a false floor. False floor. I almost laughed. My grandfather would have enjoyed that phrase. Send everything, I said, already in motion. I ended the call. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then Helena said, too lightly, what was that? I looked at the screen as the files started coming in, one by one, PDFs, schedules, formation records, ownership timelines, stamped confirmations, the quiet bones of wealth, the kind that does not glitter in public because it does not need to. That, I said, setting the phone down very gently, was my accountant. Helena's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened around the stem of the wineglass. And he sent over a file your lawyers missed. There are moments when a room changes temperature without anyone touching the thermostat. This was one of them. Helena did not answer right away. That alone told me plenty, because an innocent wife would have asked, what file? A shocked wife would have asked, what lawyers? A truthful wife would have asked, why were lawyers pulling records? Helena asked, what exactly are you implying? There it was. Defense before inquiry. Always revealing. I picked up my phone, opened the first PDF, and looked at the header. Mercer City Partners Premarital Formation Summary. The date sat at the top like a loaded weapon. 7 years before I met Helena. 3 years before our first date. Long before the vows. Long before the house. Long before she started walking through my life as if she had built the foundation under her own heels. I looked up at her. Her face was still composed. Almost, but the edge had changed. Very slightly. It is amazing how quickly superiority begins to retreat when facts arrive with timestamps. I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm noticing something. What? That your tone changed the second you thought I might leave with less than you expected? Her eyes sharpened. You're twisting this. Am I? Yes. I nodded. Then help me understand. She set the wineglass down harder than she meant to. You're being absurd. No, I'm being attentive. That landed because Helena had spent years being the attentive one, the observant one, the first to notice weakness in a room and cut toward it with precision. She was not used to being observed back. What file? She asked at last. There. Too late. But there. I held her gaze and said, the one proving the investment portfolio in this city was mine long before I met you. She blinked. Once. Twice. It was tiny, but I saw it because the words hit her in the exact order they needed to. Investment portfolio. In this city, mine, long before I met you. Helena was very intelligent. That was why the pause mattered. A less clever woman would have looked confused. Helena looked calculating. Her mind was already moving. Downtown positions, possible valuation, property appreciation, medical corridor overlap. She was putting pieces together in real time, and that was when her tone changed. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. No, Helena was too trained for that. The change came in small, surgical ways. Her shoulders lowered, her mouth softened. Her voice lost some of its acid. Evan, she said quietly, if there's something I'm missing, then maybe we should sit down and talk properly. I almost admired it. Almost. 5 seconds earlier, she was telling me I carried no real weight in the marriage. Now she wanted to talk properly. Funny how respect appears the moment money gets a clearer silhouette. I did not move. I thought this was practical, I said. It is practical and fair. She hesitated. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. Silence. Rain slid down the glass behind her. The city kept glowing. The refrigerator kept humming. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, I understood something I should have admitted to myself months earlier. This marriage was not breaking tonight. Tonight was just the first time Helena stopped pretending she was not already halfway out the door. She took a breath. You're upset. That nearly made me laugh. Upset. Such a small word for the death of trust. No, I said, not anymore. What is that supposed to mean? It means I was upset before. Now I'm interested. That unsettled her, because angry men are manageable. Hurt men are predictable. Calm men with new information are dangerous. Interested in what? In what else you thought belonged to you. That hit. She stepped back from the island. That's unfair. No, I said. What's unfair is threatening your husband with poverty before checking the paperwork. Her eyes flashed. I did not threaten you. You laughed and told me I'd walk away with nothing. That was a figure of speech. No, it was a test. She froze, very slightly. Enough, because that was the truth. She had wanted to see how I reacted, wanted to measure whether I looked frightened enough, dependent enough, smaller than she felt in that moment. She had wanted reassurance that if this marriage turned ugly, she would still be standing on the higher hill. Instead, my accountant had just sent over the map she had missed, and that changed the altitude. I think, I said quietly, looking down at the file on my phone, we should both be very careful about what happens next. Her voice tightened. Are you threatening me now? No. Then what are you doing? I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said the most honest thing I had said all month. I'm finally paying attention. That was where I saw it. The first real crack. Not anger. Not fear. Concern. Because Helena Vale had married a man she thought she understood, comfortable, capable, useful, solid enough to respect, never powerful enough to surprise her. And now surprise had entered the kitchen wearing my face. She folded her arms again, but this time it looked less like confidence and more like temperature control. You're making a lot out of one conversation. No, I said. I'm making a lot out of what the conversation revealed. That I'm tired, that you're comfortable being cruel if you think you're protected. Her jaw tightened. You have no idea how hard I work. There it was. Not an apology. Not a denial. Not, I didn't mean to speak to you that way. Just the old shield. Work. Prestige. Exhaustion. As if excellence under hospital lights erased what came out of her mouth at home, I nodded slowly. I know exactly how hard you work. Then maybe stop acting like I'm some villain because I'm realistic. Helena, I said. Realistic would have been discussing the marriage honestly. Realistic would have been talking about the distance between us before it got ugly. Realistic would have been not speaking to your husband like he should be grateful for scraps. That last line landed hard. She looked away first. Interesting, because Helena almost never looked away first. When she turned back, she had found more control. You're tired too. Let's not turn this into something permanent because of one bad night. That was the second tone change. Now she wanted de-escalation. Now she wanted the room softened. That told me the file mattered. A lot. I set my phone on the counter between us, screen lit, documents visible but unreadable from where she stood. Her eyes flicked to it anyway. Then to me, then back again. That told me even more. You can ask, I said. She hesitated. Ask what? What exactly your lawyers missed? Her face went still. For a moment, I thought she might deny everything. Instead, she made the smarter choice, the more dangerous choice. She softened her voice and said, I think you're angry and assuming the worst. I smiled, because that was not a no. I'm not assuming anymore. What does that mean? It means if your legal team was looking at structures they had no business touching, then we have a bigger conversation ahead of us than the one you planned for tonight. The blood did not leave her face. Helena was too trained for that. but the color did shift just a little around the mouth. Enough for me. She walked slowly back to the island, set both palms on the marble, and looked at me with that composed surgeon's stare people found so intimidating. I used to. Not anymore. Evan, she said very carefully, I think we should call this what it is. Go ahead. A misunderstanding. I laughed then, not loudly, just once. The sound of a man finally hearing the shape of the trap and realizing the person who built it had left the hinges showing. A misunderstanding, I repeated. Yes. No, I said. A misunderstanding is booking the wrong flight. A misunderstanding is not a wife speaking like she already knows the terms of a divorce. She straightened. You are escalating this. You started the escalation. Her eyes hardened. Fine. One word. Flat. Dangerous. I knew that tone. That was the one she used before making cuts in surgery. That was the one she used before dismissing residents. That was the one she used when she had decided compassion was slowing the procedure. Fine, she repeated. Then let's stop dancing around it. This marriage has not been working. I said nothing. She continued. We've been living parallel lives. True. We barely see each other. Also true. We want different things. Maybe. But buried underneath those true sentences was the lie she was trying to smuggle through the door. That the collapse itself was mutual. That the contempt had not entered from one side first. That this was a clinical failure, not a moral one. I looked at her and asked quietly, Are you sleeping with Aaron Pike? The room changed. Not because of the name, because of the line. No warning, no cushion, no detour. It hit the air like glass breaking underwater. Helena went completely still. Not offended, not shocked. Still. And in marriage, there are silences that answer faster than words ever could. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. This is exactly what I mean. No denial. I noticed. Interesting, I said. Her chin lifted. You're being paranoid. No, I'm being specific. That's insulting. That is not a no. Her nostrils flared once. Tiny movement. Huge meaning. I felt something twist inside my chest. Not because the answer hurt. Because I had already known. What hurt was hearing how hard she worked, not to say the simplest truth in the room. I'm not discussing colleagues with you in this tone, she said. I nodded slowly. Because it would go badly for you. Because it's inappropriate. No, I said. Because the second you start telling the truth tonight, the rest of the structure falls with it. She stared at me. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she picked up her glass again, though there was almost nothing left in it. A useless gesture. Something for her hand to do while the room stopped obeying her. You don't know what you're talking about, she said. Then deny it cleanly. Silence. That damned silence. If she had shouted, it would have hurt less. If she had cried, it would have hurt less. But Helena did what people like her always do when the truth threatens to cost them. She protected options. And in doing so, she confessed enough. I looked down at the incoming files on my phone. More confirmations. More dates. More clean lines. My city portfolio. Mine before her. Mine outside her assumptions. Mine far beyond what her people had estimated if they thought I was just the stable husband in a nice kitchen. That should have satisfied me. In a way, it did. But pain and satisfaction are not opposites. Sometimes they arrive holding hands. Helena set the glass down again. What do you want from me right now? There it was. Not what do you need. Not how do we fix this. What do you want? A negotiation question. A control question. I looked at her and realized with exhausted clarity that I did not want anything from her tonight. Not tenderness. Not honesty forced under pressure. Not a performance of regret because a file had changed the financial weather. What I wanted was distance and truth. In that order. I want you to stop talking to me like I'm the lucky one who got admitted into your life, I said. Her expression flickered. I want you to understand that whatever this marriage becomes next, it will not move according to assumptions your side forgot to verify. She swallowed. Meaningful, and I want, I said, for you to think very carefully before you make another threat disguised as fairness." Helena stood there without speaking. Then, to my surprise, she sat down, slowly, on one of the stools by the island. That was the first real sign that the ground had shifted, because Helena rarely sat in conflict. She stood over it, managed it from height, but now she sat, not because she was weak, because she was thinking. The file had done its work. She rested one hand on the marble. "You're right about one thing." I waited. My tone changed. I almost smiled. "Yes." She looked at the rain beyond the windows instead of at me, "because yours did first." "Interesting." "Not true." "Interesting." "Did it?" "Yes." "When?" She turned back toward me. "When you stopped sounding hurt." That sat with me for a second, then another, because there was truth in it. Not the kind she meant, but truth. At some point in the last month, hurt had begun hardening into attention, grief into pattern recognition, love into surveillance. I had not wanted that to be true, but there it was. She drew in a breath. "I'm not saying tonight was good. That would be difficult. I'm saying this isn't as simple as you want it to be." I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said. "It's simpler." That brought her eyes back to mine. "You said what you thought I could survive hearing," I told her, "and then you changed your tone the second you realized I had more leverage than you expected. That's very simple. 1A. She opened her mouth, closed it, nothing came out, because there was no elegant answer to that. And that was when I knew tonight was enough. Not enough to end the marriage cleanly. Not enough to know the whole shape of her betrayal, but enough to begin. Enough to stop pretending. Enough to stop loving the version of Helena that only existed when things were easy and the lights were soft, and she had not yet decided how much I was worth compared to herself. I picked up my phone and locked the screen. Then I took my wedding ring off, not dramatically, just calmly, like a man removing something he suddenly realized had been sitting too heavily on the bone. Helena's eyes dropped to my hand, then rose again. "What are you doing?" I set the ring on the counter beside the phone. "Starting to take you seriously." Her eyes widened. "Don't do that." "Interesting. Because a woman can talk about a failed marriage and laugh about leaving you with nothing? But the second a ring touches stone, suddenly she hears the echo. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm noticing where we are." "No," her voice sharpened. "You are being theatrical." I looked at the ring, then at her. "Helena, you brought legal language into my kitchen before I brought silence into it. You don't get to call me theatrical now." That shut her up. For the first time all night, truly shut her up. She looked at the ring again, then at my face, and this time I saw something new there. Fear, just a trace. Because now she understood the one thing she had not fully considered before she opened her mouth tonight. I was not going to chase her, and that changes everything. She took one step toward me. "Evan, put the ring back on." "No." The word hit her harder than I expected. She was not used to hearing it from me, not cleanly, not without explanation attached. Her voice dropped. "You are tired." "Yes, we should sleep." "No, this conversation is going in circles." "No," I said. "It's narrowing." She stopped moving. The rain kept falling. The city kept glowing. My ring sat on the counter between us like a verdict waiting for paperwork. Then Helena made one more mistake. She said very softly, "Do not blow up your life over pride." I looked at her, and in that moment, I think I stopped being her husband in the old sense of the word, because that sentence told me everything still left unsaid. She thought this was about pride. She thought this was about ego, insult, male fragility. She still did not understand. Or maybe she did and simply preferred the version that made her less monstrous. Either way, the result was the same. I met her eyes and said, "You still think I'm the one misdiagnosing this?" Then I picked up my phone, took the file, and walked past her toward my study. Behind me, she said my name once. Not softly, sharply, like a command. I did not stop, because command only works when love is still confused enough to obey it. By the time I reached my desk and shut the door behind me, I knew two things with perfect clarity. First, my wife had not laughed by accident. Second, whatever happened next, she had already started this battle weeks before tonight. She just thought she would be the only one holding the chart. That was her mistake. At 12:16 a.m., there was a soft knock on the study door. Too careful, too measured. She waited 2 seconds, then opened the door without being invited. Of course she did. She stood there in the doorway, no heels now, no wine glass, no sharp glamour from the gala. She had changed into one of my old college shirts and gray sleep shorts, bare face, hair down. She looked younger that way, softer too. That used to do something to me. Not tonight. Can we talk? She asked. I did not look up right away. I finished the page in front of me, set it down, then folded my hands on the desk. We already did. No, we argued. That's one way to describe it. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Evan, this is getting out of control. I leaned back slowly. Interesting phrase. What is that supposed to mean? It means the person who started this conversation with divorce language probably shouldn't talk to me about control. She let out a breath through her nose and crossed her arms. I should not have said it like that. That was the closest thing to an apology she had offered so far. And even then, the apology was for delivery, not meaning, not intention, not the poison inside the sentence. I watched her for a long moment. Like, what? Her eyes hardened just slightly. You know what I mean. No, I said, say it. That annoyed her, because Helena liked vague repair. It gave her room to move later. Specificity makes liars uncomfortable. She shifted her weight and tried again. I should not have laughed. Closer. But, I asked. She hated that. I could tell because her jaw tightened again. But this marriage has been strained for a long time, and you know that. There it was. Always the pivot. From cruelty to context. From insult to mutual problem. From her behavior to our condition. I nodded once. Yes, it has. Then stop acting like tonight came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere, it came out of you. That landed. She looked away first, toward the bookshelves. On the second shelf from the top sat a framed photo from 4 years ago, taken on a rooftop in Lisbon. Helena in a white dress, me with one arm around her waist, both of us smiling at something out of frame. We looked like people who still trusted each other then. Or maybe we only looked good from that angle. I'm trying to fix this before we both say things we regret, she said. I glanced at the ringless hand resting on my desk. You're late. Why are you doing this? Doing what? This cold thing. That almost made me laugh. Because coldness always feels cruelest to people who were counting on your warmth to cover what they were about to do. I'm not being cold, I said. I'm being accurate. No, you're punishing me. I looked at her properly then. Really looked. And there it was again. That same instinct, the same one from the kitchen. She still wanted to make herself the injured party in a conversation she had poisoned. That told me more than any file on my desk. You walked into our kitchen, I said quietly, laughed about me leaving with nothing, and then tried to soften the room the second you realized your side missed something important. If you think my distance is punishment, you have a very generous definition of your own behavior. Her face changed. Not with tears. Not with shame. With anger. Your side, she repeated. Is that how you're going to talk now? Like I'm some opposing counsel? I said nothing. That answer was louder than words. She stepped closer to the desk. You think because your accountant found some old paperwork, you suddenly understand everything. No, I said. I think because your lawyers were looking, I suddenly understand enough. Silence. That one hit exactly where I meant it to. Because once again, she did not deny the lawyers. She did not ask what request. She did not say she knew nothing about it. She just stared at me. And in that stare was the first real sign that Helena was no longer sure what I could prove. And that uncertainty was doing damage. She lowered her voice. You don't know what they were asked to review. Then tell me. She hesitated. Too long. Then there were preliminary discussions. I smiled once. not kindly. About what? About exposure. Whose? Ours. No, I said. Try again. Her eyes flashed. You are enjoying this. I had heard that once already tonight. Interesting how often guilty people think clarity is cruelty. No, I said. I'm paying attention. She stared at me for a moment, then did something I had not expected. She sat down in the chair opposite my desk, not elegantly, not like Helena at a donor dinner or in a hospital board meeting. She sat like a woman who finally understood that standing above the conversation no longer worked. For a second, I saw how tired she actually was. Not just physically, deep tired, the kind that comes from holding too many performances together at once. Fine, she said. I waited. Fine, she repeated. Do you want truth? Here is some. Yes, I spoke to counsel. Yes, there were early conversations. Yes, I wanted to understand what a divorce would look like if things got worse. There it was. Not the whole truth, but enough to stain the room. I kept my face still. When did that start? I asked. She looked at my desk instead of me. A few weeks ago. Before or after Aaron. Her head snapped up. Again, not offended. Not shocked. Just sharpened. That told me everything. This is exactly why I didn't want to do this like this, she said. No, I said. This is exactly why you did. Her voice dropped. You don't understand what the last year has been like for me. I let the silence sit. Not because I had no answer, because I wanted to hear what came next. People tell on themselves when you don't rush to rescue them. She leaned back and looked at the ceiling for a second before speaking again. I've been working 80-hour weeks. I've been carrying trauma home every night. I've been functioning in an environment where one mistake means someone dies. And every time I came home, you were steady. I blinked once. Steady. Yes, I almost laughed. Because only Helena could turn steadiness into an accusation. She pushed on. You were always calm, always measured, always composed, like nothing really touched you. That isn't true. It felt true. There it was. Not evidence, not reality, feeling. And people build the ugliest stories when they start worshiping their own feelings as facts. So what? I asked quietly. You started planning exits because I wasn't dramatic enough for you? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. No. She shook her head and leaned forward now, frustrated. I started planning because I felt alone in this marriage. There was enough truth in that to make it dangerous. Because, yes, we had been drifting. Yes, I had spent more time in the office. Yes, she came home from the hospital with death in her eyes sometimes, and I did not always know how to follow her into that darkness. But loneliness is not the same as betrayal. Strain is not the same as contempt. And exhaustion is not permission to turn a spouse into a target. I could have worked with lonely, I said. She looked at me. I could have worked with hurt. I could have worked with anger. I could have worked with distance. What I cannot work with is contempt. Her face went still, because that was the word. The right word. The word she had been dancing around all night. I held her eyes and continued. You didn't come into that kitchen talking like a woman who was sad. You came in talking like a woman who had already decided what I deserved. No. Yes. That's not fair. There's that word again. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, I thought she might finally say it. I'm sorry. Not I'm tired. Not I didn't mean the tone. Not this marriage has been hard. Just the two words that might have made the room feel less dead. But Helena had never been good at the kind of apology that cost something. Instead, she said, You're making one bad night define everything. I leaned forward now. No, I'm letting one honest night explain everything. That shut her up, and in the silence that followed, I heard it. A vibration. Her phone in the pocket of her sleep shorts. Her eyes flicked downward for half a second. Then back to me. There are moments when your body knows the truth before your pride can form language around it. That was one of them. Take it out, I said. What? Your phone. Her face changed. Just a little. Every line sharpened. It's late, she said. It could be the hospital. Then take it out. She did not move. I stood slowly. That made her stand too. Now we were both on our feet with the desk between us, and the room felt very small. Evan, she said carefully, this is insane. No, what's insane is that your husband asks to see the phone buzzing in your pocket during a conversation about divorce planning, and you think he's the one who sounds unreasonable. It might be trauma call. Then show me. She held my gaze, then looked away. There it was. Silence. I laughed once, low and tired. That's what I thought. She turned sharp. Do not talk to me like I'm guilty of something because I won't hand over my phone on command. It's not the refusal, I said. It's the timing. Her voice rose. I am allowed privacy. Of course you are. Then stop acting like this. Like what? Like some wounded prosecutor. That almost made me smile, because that was exactly what she was afraid of. Not my pain, my clarity. I stepped back from the desk and sat down again, suddenly exhausted by the shape of her. Keep the phone. That unsettled her more than the demand had, because she had prepared herself to refuse. People get confused when you stop helping them perform their role. I glanced at the documents on my desk. You can go. Her voice dropped. You're dismissing me now? Yes. This is my house too. That one hung there. Ugly. Accidental. Very revealing. Because she did not say our house. Not tonight. Not anymore. I looked at her and said, interesting choice of words. For the first time, she seemed to realize what had just come out of her mouth. She corrected too quickly. That's not what I meant. It usually is. She stared at me with something like hatred then. Not pure hatred. Something more complex. Pride cornered by exposure. Fear wearing irritation. The fury of a woman who had carefully arranged a room in her mind and was now standing in a different one. You know what? She said. Fine. Stay in here and play accountant and detective and wounded husband. I'm done for tonight. She turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, she stopped. Without looking back, she said, you always did mistake silence for superiority. Then she left. The door closed behind her. At 12:47, I called Mason back. He answered immediately. You're still up. So are you. Yes, and I took the liberty of doing more than you asked. That was why I paid him very well. Tell me. There's no question the original city portfolio is yours alone. Formation dates are airtight. But once I saw the request path her side used, I looked wider. I sat back down and opened a clean notebook. And there's overlap. My pen stopped. What kind of overlap? Hospital-adjacent commercial, outpatient retail corridors, parking structures feeding St. Catherine's satellite footprint, one imaging center lease, 2 medical office buildings with specialist subtenants. I said nothing. Mason continued. Nothing improper, not on your side. But if someone assumed marital integration later, or hoped to influence allocation, expansion, or advisory direction through domestic connection, they could see opportunity. I finished. Yes, there was another piece. Maybe Helena had not married me for access. I was not ready to say that. But somewhere along the way, access had clearly become part of the weather around her thinking. And once that happens, love changes texture. You think she knew the scope? I asked. Mason was quiet for a second. I think she knew enough to ask the wrong questions. That was good enough. At 1:03 a.m., I opened Helena's public calendar. Not by hacking anything. She was too smart for sloppy passwords, and I was too careful for stupid crimes. I opened the shared household calendar she had forgotten still linked to our home system. There it was. Tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Dinner AP. No location. No notes. Just initials. Clean enough to deny. Specific enough to understand. I took a screenshot and emailed it to a private archive account I rarely used. Not because it proved an affair. Because patterns matter. At 1:22, there was another knock on the study door. Harder this time. I did not answer. 3 seconds later, Helena tried the handle. Locked. She knocked again. Evan. I stayed silent. Her voice came through the wood. Unlock the door. No, please. No, can we talk? Unlock the door. Command again. Control again. Same instinct. When I did not answer, she let out a breath sharp enough to hear. Then, quieter, This isn't helping. Still, I said nothing. Eventually, her footsteps moved away. That was when I knew this had moved beyond hurt. A hurt man still waits outside the door, hoping to be understood. A clear man lets the footsteps leave. I woke at 6:18 with my neck stiff and one of Mason's files still glowing on the desk monitor. Formation timeline, asset origin, beneficial chain. The whole history of what Helena had thought she understood, laid out in black and white. I unlocked the study and walked into the kitchen. The ring sat exactly where I had left it. Beside it sat Helena's note. 3 lines. Emergency case, left early. We are not finished. Please don't do anything stupid. I read it twice, then laughed, because that was Helena in 3 lines. Work first, control second. And hidden inside both, the assumption that I was the one most likely to act irrationally. Not her, with her lawyers and her late night messages and her careful little calendar entry with another man's initials. Me. I photographed the note, archived it with the calendar screenshot, and sent both to a secure folder Mason and my attorney, Claire Donovan, could access if I told them to. At 7:05, I called Claire. She answered on the second ring. This had better be interesting. It is. That got a pause. Claire Donovan liked very few things, but one of them was being right in advance. She had disliked Helena 3 dinners before I noticed the problem myself. Tell me. So I did. Not all of it emotionally. Just the bones. The kitchen conversation. The legal file request. The missed premarital portfolio. The calendar entry. The note. The tone change. When I finished, Claire was silent for 3 full seconds. Then she said, I need you to hear me clearly. I'm listening. Do nothing impulsive. No confrontation in writing. No dramatic emails. No surprise appearances. No telling mutual friends. No threatening the hospital. No talking to this errand person. No announcing divorce before we built the spine. That was why I called her. I wasn't planning to. Good, because if her side has already started asking the questions you say they're asking, then this may have been moving toward exit long before last night. I know. No, Claire said. You suspect. I need proof, not injury. Fair. Always fair. That's why I called. She exhaled once. Send me everything. The note, the screenshots, the file history from Mason, and a written timeline while it's fresh. 1, I can do that. And Evan? Yes? If she laughed about you leaving with nothing, she either feels very safe or very informed. I'd like to know which. So would I. Claire's voice cooled even further. Then let's find out before she realizes the board changed. At 8:32, Helena texted, we should talk tonight, calmly. Then another, and please do not bring attorneys into this yet. I read it. There it was. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. Not, we need help. Do not bring attorneys into this yet. That told me more than any love confession could have. Because the second legal structure becomes her concern, truth becomes mine. I typed back exactly 6 words. Then, you should have been kinder. She did not answer for 2 hours. When she finally did, it was just 1 line. That's not fair. I stared at it, then locked the phone. Because fairness had become her favorite word the moment facts stopped favoring her. At 6:42 the next morning, my phone buzzed with a calendar notification I had not created. Breakfast 7:15 a.m. with Dr. Helena Vale. Location, home. I stared at the screen, then laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was so exactly her. When a room stopped obeying Helena emotionally, she reorganized it administratively. She wanted the meeting formal now, timed, defined. Neatly boxed inside a calendar block, as if a failing marriage could be managed the way she managed rounds. I declined it. 2 seconds later, the guest room door opened. Helena stepped into the hallway, already dressed for the hospital. Dark navy suit over scrubs, hair pinned back, face composed enough to look almost untouched by the night. She had chosen armor this morning, not softness. That told me enough. Her eyes flicked to my phone in my hand. You declined it. Yes. She came into the kitchen and stopped on the other side of the island. We need to talk. We've been doing a lot of that. No, she said, irritation flashing through the polish. We've been circling. I set the mug down. That depends on whether you're telling the truth. She folded her arms. I have surgery in 90 minutes. I don't have time for this version of you. Interesting. This version, as though clarity had changed my personality instead of my tolerance. You should have thought about that before last night, I said. Her mouth tightened. I am trying to keep this from becoming uglier. No, I said. You're trying to keep it from becoming visible. That hit. Good. Because it was true. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rattle of rain against the rear windows. Morning had come in gray again. Helena glanced toward the espresso machine, then back at me. Did you involve your attorney? Yes. That answer landed like a clean cut. And your accountant? Yes. So now this is formal. No, I said. Now it's protected. She exhaled once through her nose. You really think I'm trying to destroy you? I looked at her for a long second. Then I said, I think you were comfortable with the possibility that I would be smaller when this ended. That sat between us. Not flashy, not loud, but heavy. Because the sentence cut past all the safer arguments. Past Aaron, past loneliness, past distance, past work. It named the real thing underneath. Hierarchy. She looked away first, toward the sink. You always reduce everything to motive. No, I reduce everything to pattern. And what pattern am I in now? I almost smiled. The one where your tone changed the second the paperwork got inconvenient. That made her jaw tighten again. You keep saying that like it proves something monstrous. No, I said quietly. It proves something useful. Her eyes snapped back to mine. Useful. Yes, that's an ugly word. I nodded slowly. I agree. There was the faintest pause after that. Enough for her to understand, because she knew that word mattered now. Knew I had heard its cousin in her own mouth when she laughed in the kitchen. Knew I had started tracing the language underneath the marriage instead of the gestures on top of it. She uncrossed her arms and reached for her coffee cup from the drying rack. Not because she wanted coffee, because she wanted something in her hand. What exactly do you think is happening here? She asked. This was not an innocent question. It was a fishing question, a measurement question. She wanted to know how much I saw, so I gave her less than I knew and more than she wanted. I think, I said, you started imagining a life after me before you finished being honest with me. I think another man became emotionally relevant before this marriage was morally closed. I think lawyers got asked questions they had no business asking unless someone was already mapping exits. And I think you were far more comfortable with all of that when you believed the financial landscape favored you. Helena went very still, not because the words were dramatic, because they were precise. That was always harder to fight. When she spoke again, her voice had gone quieter. And if I say that isn't fair, I'd say you've become deeply attached to that word. Her expression thinned. Because you're using certainty where you only have fragments. No, I said. I'm using fragments where you should have given me truth. That shut her up. Then she made the mistake. Very small, but I saw it. She said, you have no idea what this could cost me. Not us. Not the marriage. Me. Cost me. That sentence lit up the whole board. Because now we were closer. Much closer. I straightened slowly. What exactly are you worried about losing? Her eyes flickered. Then she said too quickly, my reputation, the hospital, the board, the way this could look if you turn vindictive. There it was again. Not I hurt you, not I ruined us. How this could look. I nodded once, almost gently, and there it is. What? The first honest fear you've said out loud. Her face cooled. You are twisting everything. No, I'm listening. She stared at me for a long second, then did something I had not expected. She stepped around the island and came closer. Not all the way, just enough to change the air. In another season of our marriage, that move would have meant softness, reconciliation, private language. Today it meant strategy. She lowered her voice. Evan, please. That word almost got me. Not because it sounded sincere, Because it sounded familiar, Helena rarely begged, but she knew how to use gentleness like a scalpel when force stopped working. Please what? I asked. Don't make this ugly. I looked at her, really looked at her. Beautiful woman, brilliant woman, tired woman, dangerous woman. And for 1 weak second, I saw the version of her that used to come home after 30 hours awake and fall asleep on my shoulder while I loosened the pins from her hair one by one. That memory hurt more than anything she had said, because memories are treacherous. They always show up dressed like evidence for a love that has already changed species. I took one slow breath and said, "You keep asking me not to make visible what you already made real." That broke the moment. Her face hardened again. She stepped back. Good. Because if she had stayed soft 1 second longer, I might have hated myself for remembering her as a wife, instead of seeing her clearly as an opposing party with better cheekbones. She checked the time on the oven clock. I have to go. Of course you do. I mean it. So do I. Her mouth tightened. Do not contact the hospital. Interesting. I hadn't mentioned the hospital, which meant she had. That was how guilt works when it starts sweating. It protects the sore spots before anyone touches them. I folded my arms. Why would I contact the hospital? She hesitated. Too long. Then, because you're angry. No, I said, because you're worried. That landed. She looked at me like she wanted to slap the sentence off my face. Instead, she said, I'm worried you're not thinking clearly. I almost laughed again. This was becoming a pattern. Every time she ran out of moral ground, she questioned my stability, not screaming it, not saying it openly, just placing little stones in that path. Angry husband, emotional husband, not thinking clearly, don't do anything stupid, don't make this ugly. Useful, very useful. I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and typed a note in front of her. 6:49 a.m. Helena unsolicited. Do not contact the hospital. Continuing implication that I may act irrationally, publicly. Her face changed. Are you writing that down? Yes. That is insane. No, I said. It's chronology. For the first time since she walked into the kitchen, Helena looked rattled, because she understood exactly what chronology meant. It meant I was no longer reacting as a husband. I was preserving as a witness. And once someone starts doing that, the emotional weather matters less than the record. She looked at the note on my screen, then at me. You're trying to make me look dangerous. No, I said quietly. I'm trying to keep you from making me look unstable. That shut her up completely. Then she picked up her coat from the chair, slung it over one arm, and reached for her bag. At the door to the mudroom, she stopped and turned back. What do you want me to tell people? There. That was the real question. Not what do we do? What do I tell people? Because now she was thinking about perimeter, social containment. The first version of the story. I smiled without warmth. The truth would be refreshing. She knew that's not what I meant, was sitting behind her eyes before she even said it. I know exactly what you mean, I said. Say your husband found out you'd started planning the emotional and financial weather of a divorce before you had the courage to speak honestly inside the marriage. That is not what happened. I nodded. Then you're free to choose your own wording. Her nostrils flared once. You are unbelievably cruel when you feel cornered. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was true, because it was almost a confession. Cornered. She was the one who felt cornered. That was why she kept projecting it onto me. I said nothing. She held my gaze another second, then turned and walked out. The front door closed. The house went quiet again, and in that quiet, I let myself feel it. Not victory. Relief. Because Helena had finally stopped pretending this was about healing, she was managing exposure now. That meant whatever softness had once lived here was either dead or too small to matter. At 8:11, Mason called. You're going to hate this. That usually means it matters. It does. Tell me. There's a donor board overlap I don't like. I pulled out a chair and sat. What kind of overlap? The Hospital District Redevelopment Initiative. Helena and Pike aren't just both listed. They attended 2 closed planning dinners in the last 6 months tied to corridor expansion and specialist occupancy strategy. My hand stilled on the table. Was I represented there? Not directly. Mercer City Partners appears only on external stakeholder summaries. But your portfolio touches enough of that geography that anyone thinking ahead could see future value in understanding your structures. There it was again, not proof. Pattern. Pattern was enough to keep pulling. Do we know if Helena knew about that? Not cleanly. But I found something else. 3 months ago, one of her legal research subscriptions was used to pull state treatment of premarital investment appreciation tied to marital lifestyle integration. That hit like cold water down the spine. Not because it was shocking, because it was so specific. So she wasn't just asking whether divorce would be difficult. No, she was asking whether premarital assets could be blurred by use. Yes, there it was. No more vague exposure language. No more, maybe she was just scared. She had been asking a legal question with a target in mind. A question that only matters if someone is already trying to estimate which walls can be made to look shared. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them and asked, "How did you get that?" Cross-referenced through a retained metadata access point. Perfectly lawful. I almost smiled at that. Mason always heard the lawyer I hadn't voiced yet. "You need to assume she did not just want emotional leverage," he said. She wanted informational leverage. That sentence stayed in the air because it named the thing I had been circling. Not money exactly. Not theft exactly. Something subtler. She wanted to know which parts of my world could be pulled closer if the marriage ended badly enough. Access first. Claim later? Maybe. Or influence? The specifics mattered less than the instinct. And once that instinct enters a marriage, everything turns poisonous. I added the note to the growing chronology. At 9:02, Helena texted. "Long case, home late, we should talk after dinner. No drama, please." I read it twice. No drama, please. There it was again. That need to frame me before the next scene even began. Useful, very useful. By evening, I was back in the house. I waited in the living room. No wine, no television, no music. Just one lamp on, the city pressing against the windows, and the kind of quiet that makes even decent people nervous. At 9:31, Helena came in. No takeout this time. No softness. No calendar invitation. Just a woman in a black coat carrying a leather bag and wearing the face she used when she was about to walk into surgery and did not expect the body on the table to cooperate. She saw me waiting, paused, then set the bag down by the stairs. "You're in here." "Yes." "Why?" I looked at the couch opposite mine. "Sit." She stared at me for one long second. Then she did. That mattered. Because Helena only sat when she believed information was coming, and she was right. I leaned forward, hands clasped, and asked the question I had spent all day refining. "When did you first start asking legal questions about whether premarital investments can be blurred by marital lifestyle integration?" Her face changed. There. Not much. Not enough for a stranger. Enough for me. Enough to know I had finally stopped circling the right wound and put pressure directly on it. She did not answer right away. That was all the answer I needed for the first 3 seconds. Because innocent people react with confusion before strategy. Guilty people do the opposite. She leaned back very slightly on the couch, one hand resting on the arm, the other still holding her phone. Not tightly, not loosely, just enough for me to notice she had not put it away. "Interesting." When Helena finally spoke, her voice was measured. "Where did you hear that phrase?" Not what phrase. Not I didn't ask that. Where did you hear that phrase? There it was. Confirmation disguised as defense. I held her gaze. "You're answering a question with a question. And you're ambushing me. Helena, you brought legal strategy into the marriage before I brought legal language into the room. Let's not pretend you're surprised by procedure now." Her jaw tightened. She set the phone down on the side table and folded her hands in her lap. Very composed, very deliberate, every movement calibrated. That used to intimidate me a little. Now it just looked like prep work. "You've been digging," she said. "Yes, into me." "No," I said. "Into the gap between what you've said and what you've done." That landed, not loudly, but I saw it settle into her shoulders. For the first time all night, she did not reach immediately for a counterattack. She looked tired then, really tired. Not hospital tired, soul tired. And still, even then, I did not trust her. Because exhaustion can be real and manipulation can still be working through it at the same time, she looked toward the dark windows and said, "You are making this uglier than it needed to be." "No," I said. "I'm making it more accurate than you wanted it to be." She turned back slowly. "You have one line for everything now. I'm catching up." Her mouth thinned. Then she asked, "What exactly do you think you found?" That was the wrong move. Because the innocent version of Helena would have asked what I was accusing her of. The practical version would have asked what Claire knew. The frightened version might have asked whether I was preparing to file. But the strategic version wanted to measure evidence. "What exactly have you found?" That told me she was still calculating the perimeter. I leaned back and let the silence stretch long enough to be uncomfortable. Then I said, "You first." Her brows drew together. "What?" "You answer my question first." She held my gaze. I don't respond well to interrogation in my own home. Interesting choice of words. Your own home. She closed her eyes briefly, just enough for me to see the instant she realized what she had said. Then she reopened them. "That's not what I meant." It usually is. That hurt her. I could tell because her next breath came in too sharp. She stood up, walked to the windows, and wrapped her arms around herself. Not dramatically. More like someone trying to hold her posture together from the outside. She kept her back to me when she spoke. "Yes," she said, "I asked legal questions." There it was, clean enough to matter. Not the whole truth, but a real piece. I said nothing. She continued. "I asked because things had become unstable between us. I wanted to know what protection looked like if we couldn't fix it." I let that sit, then said, "And why that specific question?" Silence. The city glittered beyond her reflection. I could see her face faintly in the glass now. When she answered, her voice had gone flatter, because our life had become integrated. "No." She turned halfway toward me. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. "Try again." Her face hardened. "What does that mean?" "It means our life had become integrated," is the kind of sentence people use when they want legal language to sound emotional. "I asked you why that question." She stared at me. Then came the anger. "What exactly do you want, Evan?" she snapped. "A confession? A transcript? A full moral autopsy where I sit here and narrate every wrong thought I've had in the last year?" I stood slowly. "No," I said. "I want one thing. I want you to stop speaking to me like I'm too stupid to hear intent when it's dressed up as caution." That silenced her, because that was the exact line she had been walking. Not full lies, not full truth. Intent disguised as prudence. Self-protection disguised as realism. Curiosity disguised as legal hygiene. I stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough to remove the comfort of distance. "You didn't ask that question because life gets integrated," I said quietly. "You asked it because somewhere in your head you had already started trying to figure out which parts of my world could be made to look shared if this ended badly." Her lips parted. No sound came out. That was when I knew I had put my hand directly on the right wound. She looked away first. Then she did something even more revealing. She said, very quietly, "You make me sound calculating." I laughed once. "I'm not making you sound anything." That hit harder than I expected. Because for the first time, I saw it. Underneath, shame. Actual shame. Not enough to save anything. Enough to make her hate me for seeing it. She moved away from the window and sat down again, slower this time. "You have no idea what it felt like to live inside this marriage these last 18 months. "Then tell me honestly," I said. Not elegantly, not strategically, not in language that sounds better in your head than it does in reality. "Tell me what happened." That unsettled her more than accusation, because accusation lets people defend. An invitation to tell the truth leaves them alone with what they choose. She stared at the carpet for a long moment before speaking. "When I met Aaron," she said, "he was easy. There it was. Past the line already. Not a stumble. A path. I did not move." She kept going, voice low, eyes nowhere near mine. He saw the hospital the way I did. The hours, the politics, the fatigue, the absurdity. He didn't need translation. I didn't have to come home and explain where my head was. That hurt, because there was truth in it. I had not always known how to meet her in the world she came home from. Blood, adrenaline, bad coffee, impossible hours, deaths she wore behind her eyes and never fully unpacked. I had loved her. But sometimes love is not fluent enough in the language the other person starts dreaming in. Still, loneliness is not permission. Understanding is not a marriage vow. So you started with understanding, I said, and ended with legal research. Her head snapped up. That one she hated, because it forced those two things to stand too close together. That's cruel. No, it's sequence. She stood again, faster this time, like the couch had become too honest a place to sit. You really think this is that simple? You think people don't drift? You think marriages don't break in pieces before they break in public? Yes, I said. I also think the decent thing is to say that before you start measuring what you can take with you. That landed so hard she went still. The room stayed silent long enough for the city beyond the windows to start feeling like another audience. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. No polish now. No surgeon's careful authority. Just a woman with her pride opened up and bleeding through the dressings. I did not want your money. Interesting. I looked at her for a long second. That's not the same as not wanting access. Her eyes flashed. You see, this is what I mean. You take every nuance and drag it into the ugliest possible shape. I nodded slowly. Because the cleaner shape died when your side missed the file and your tone changed. She turned away sharply, then turned back, then finally said it. The sentence that explained the whole structure better than anything else so far. I was trying to avoid being trapped. There it was. Not trying to be fair. Not trying to protect what was mine. Avoid being trapped. That was the frame. And once I heard it, everything clicked. In Helena's mind, uncertainty itself was a trap. Emotional dependency was a trap. Not knowing how much leverage either of us had was a trap. Loving someone whose full map she couldn't see was a trap. And if she felt trapped, she gave herself permission to start building exits before saying the word out loud. That was the moral collapse. Not one affair. Not one cruel sentence. That. I looked at her and said quietly, "You were not trapped. You were married." That broke something in the room. Not theatrically, with silence. The kind that arrives when one sentence lands closer to the bone than all the previous shouting. She sat down again, this time not out of calculation, out of weight. "I don't know when I stopped feeling safe with you," she said. There was enough truth in that to make it painful. Not because I thought she was right, because once I would have moved heaven to make her feel safe. But tonight it hit differently. Tonight I heard what sat behind it. Safe. Again, not loved, not respected. Safe. Even now, the marriage was being translated into conditions and threat levels, into emotional weather and structural exposure. Helena didn't just love badly. She thought transactionally. Maybe not always. Maybe not at the beginning. But somewhere along the line, that part of her had taken the wheel. I walked to the sideboard, poured myself water, and asked the next question without turning around. "Did you sleep with him?" The room disappeared after that. Not literally. Just in the way all space narrows when the only thing that matters is whether the next sentence will finish the structure or leave one more wall standing. I heard her take a breath. Then another. When I turned, she was staring straight at me. No dodge this time. No redirect. No elegance. "Yes," she said. The word hit cleanly, cleaner than I expected. Maybe because part of me had already buried the body. Maybe because by the time truth finally arrives, grief has often done most of its work in advance. Still, I felt it. A tightness low in the chest. Not dramatic, just the body's quiet recognition that something has moved from suspicion into permanent fact. I nodded once. Nothing else. That seemed to disturb her more than if I had shouted. "When?" I asked. She looked down. 3 months ago. 3 months. Long enough to become pattern. Long enough to become habit. long enough to make every dinner, every cold night, every delayed shift, every strange silence in bed rearrange itself in my memory like furniture in a house after a death. I set the glass down carefully, and the legal questions? She closed her eyes. There it was again, that moment where chronology punishes harder than morality. After, she said, of course, because once betrayal enters, people start preparing terrain. Sometimes just to reduce the fear of consequence. Sometimes because if they can redraw the map fast enough, they can pretend the affair was a symptom instead of a choice. I looked at her for a long time, then said the sentence that ended whatever private softness still remained in me. So, you gave another man what was still mine, then started researching what else could be blurred afterward. Her face changed as if I had slapped her. Good, because that was the first sentence I had spoken all night that was as ugly as the truth deserved. That is vicious, she whispered. No, I said. That is accurate. And there it was, the whole thing. My wife had slept with another man, then quietly started asking how much of my premarital structure could be made softer if the marriage ended in a controlled burn. I stood in my own living room and felt something inside me go very still. Not numb, still. That dangerous stillness that comes when pain finishes becoming clarity. Helena looked at me with wet eyes now, but still no tears fell. She was too proud for messy crying. Always had been. I did not marry you for money, she said. I believed that. Strangely, I did. At least not at the beginning. That was what made this sad instead of simple. I nodded once. I know, that seemed to shock her, because she expected me to flatten her into one easy villain. But I wasn't interested in cheap. Somewhere along the way, you started feeling trapped by what you couldn't fully see, attracted to what felt easier, and entitled to prepare exits before being honest. That's uglier than greed. Greed would have been simpler. Her lips trembled once. There, finally, not because she was redeemed, because she had been understood too precisely to keep hiding inside her own story. She stood up, but this time there was no authority in it, just motion. What happens now? She asked. At last. No more philosophy. No more emotional weather. Just the thing itself. I looked at the woman I had married. Really looked. The surgeon. The admired one. The woman who once fell asleep on my chest after 30 hours awake and mumbled half-finished medical jargon into my shirt. The woman who had betrayed me in body, in sequence, in structure, and then still tried to control the tone of the aftermath. My answer came easier than I expected. Now, I said, you stop telling me what this is supposed to look like. She blinked. What? You don't ask me to stay calm. You don't ask me not to make it ugly. You don't ask me not to contact the hospital. You don't ask me to keep this private while you protect yourself. That period is over. Her face lost what little color it had left. You're going public? No. Then what are you saying? I'm saying you don't get to manage me anymore. That landed hardest of all, because management had been the hidden engine behind everything. The marriage, the legal questions, the affair, the careful softening every time she sensed the room turning against her. She swallowed. And if I ask for discretion? I almost smiled. Then I'll know you still haven't understood what you actually destroyed. Silence again. Then she said, very softly, do you hate me? That question came too late. Too honestly. I looked at her for a long time before answering. No, I said. I hate what you let yourself become while telling yourself it was caution. That broke her more than rage would have. I saw it, not in tears, in posture, in the way she seemed, for one brief second, unable to decide where to place her own hands. That was the moment I knew I had won the only victory that mattered. Not the money, not the file, not the legal perimeter. Truth. She could no longer survive inside the cleaner story she had been writing about herself. My phone buzzed on the side table. Claire. I glanced at the screen but didn't answer. Helena saw the name, and again her tone changed. To survival? Evan, she said, very carefully, before this becomes machinery. I laughed then. A real laugh. Short. Cold. Because that was perfect. Before this becomes machinery? As if she had not already tried to turn the marriage into one. As if legal research quiet positioning, emotional transfer, and calendar-coded dinners were not already gears. It became machinery, I said, when you started treating our marriage like a corridor to be exited strategically. That shut her up again. Then I picked up the phone, not because I needed Claire in that exact second, because Helena needed to watch what happened when I stopped protecting her from process. I answered. Claire, her voice was crisp, unsurprised. You sound finished. I am. Do I need to ask whether she admitted it? No. A brief pause. Then, all right. Do not discuss division tonight. Do not negotiate terms. Do not agree to secrecy language. Do not offer emotional settlement in place of legal discipline. Tell her all future logistical discussion goes through me unless you decide otherwise. Helena could hear enough of that to understand the direction. Her face hardened again. Last offense. Last vanity. Good. I needed her proud now, not persuasive. I understand, I said, and ended the call. Then I looked at Helena and gave her the cleanest sentence of the night. You'll hear from Claire. For a moment, I thought she might explode. Instead, she did something much more revealing. She nodded once. A tiny, controlled nod, like a woman already moving from marriage into case file. Interesting. Then she asked, do I need to leave tonight? I looked around the room. The lamp, the bookshelves, the rain-dimmed city. The couch where we had once watched old movies with takeout boxes between us and my feet under her legs. And I heard the answer before I said it. Yes, that hit, really hit, because thresholds matter. And asking a wife to leave the house means something even when the marriage has already died in 6 other ways first. You're throwing me out. No, I said. I'm ending the lie that this is still home in the same way for both of us. For the first time, tears reached her eyes and stayed there. Not falling, just there. Bright enough to see. Good. Let them stay. She had spent long enough protecting surfaces. You're serious, she whispered. Yes. She nodded once more. Then she moved. Not quickly. She picked up her bag from beside the stairs, walked to the entry table, took her keys, then stopped with one hand resting on the polished wood. Without turning back, she said, I never thought you'd be this hard. I looked at her and answered with the truest thing I had left. You never thought I'd stop being available for your version of me. That did it. Then she walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the wet night. The door closed softly behind her. I locked the front door, walked back into the living room, and finally let myself sit down. Not with relief. More like the body's version of a long exhale after a blade has gone all the way in and there is no more fear left about whether it will. The next morning, Naomi called before 8. You need to hear something before it reaches you another way. Tell me. One of the hospital donors is already repeating that you and Helena are going through a private strain and that you've become unstable about financial boundaries. I went very still. There it was. Speed. She had moved faster than even I expected. Not full attack. Just seeding. Just enough. Just the beginning of the story she had been trying to build since the first don't do anything stupid note. Source? I asked. Indirect. But real enough. Of course it was. I looked out at the city, pale under a clean sky, at last. Then I smiled. Not because it felt good. Because now I knew. There would be no late apology that mattered. No private dignity preserved by mutual mercy. Helena had chosen narrative protection within hours of leaving the house. She was still trying to keep her image above the wreckage. That made everything easier. I spent the first half of the day in Claire's office. She clicked her pen once and said, "Good." I looked at her. That word again. Yes, she said, because now she has committed to narrative before she knows the full perimeter of your record. That is usually when people get sloppy. She turned her legal pad toward me. 3 columns. Affair. Asset reconnaissance. Reputational pre-framing. Underneath them, arrows. Your wife's problem, she said, tapping the page, is not that she had an affair. Plenty of divorces survive affairs publicly. Some even survive them privately. Her problem is sequence. If we can prove emotional overlap, legal inquiry, and narrative shaping in the right order, she stops looking lonely and starts looking strategic. There it was. Not morality. Architecture. That was the language I understood best now. I nodded. What do you need? Everything that touches timing, especially anything tied to Aaron Pike, hospital corridor overlap, donor committees, or legal research. I also want all phone logs between you and Helena from the last 6 months, your travel overlap, and any change in spending patterns that suggest concealment. Done. And I want to know, Claire said, whether Aaron Pike knows what game he is standing inside. That was the question, because affairs come in different classes. Some are emotional drift, some are vanity, some are opportunistic, and some are stupid enough to overlap with money, influence, and professional adjacency. I said, I don't know yet. Find out without touching him directly. That ruled out the obvious. Good. I had no interest in becoming the jealous husband confronting a surgeon in a hospital parking garage. Claire saw the thought cross my face. Yes, exactly. Don't give her the movie scene she's quietly praying for. By noon, Martin had locked down every hospital-adjacent file pathway that mattered. By early afternoon, Mason had gone deeper. When he called back, his first sentence was, "You're going to hate this." That usually means it matters. It does. I found a soft contact point between Aaron Pike's family office and one of the corridor advisory consultants. I stopped walking. What kind of contact point? Old donor crossover. Not current business partners, not direct development collaboration, but enough shared board space over the last 5 years that introductions happen without effort. I looked across the street at the glass face of a new hotel catching the sun. So Aaron wasn't just some emotionally convenient coworker. No, Mason said carefully, not if you define convenient broadly enough. That was the thing about men like Aaron Pike. They rarely looked dangerous in the most obvious way. Not because they were more moral, because they had been raised inside rooms where access was wallpaper. They didn't need to think of themselves as opportunists. Opportunity simply sat near them often enough to feel natural. Anything tying Helena directly to financial discussions? I asked. Not cleanly, not yet. But if I were trying to understand why a surgeon starts asking specific legal questions about premarital appreciation after beginning an affair with a man sitting near hospital-adjacent donor circles, I would not call it romantic confusion. Neither would I. When I got back to my office, Naomi was waiting with a printout. Your wife's name came across our media monitor. I took the page. It wasn't public press. Worse. A clipped mention in a donor events digest circulated privately among hospital supporters and city redevelopment patrons. The line was small, easy to miss. Dr. Helena Vale may be stepping back temporarily from one home-hosted fall fundraising series due to personal restructuring. I read it twice, then a third time. Personal restructuring, not separation, not marital trouble, not divorce. Personal restructuring, clinical language, safe language, language designed to make everyone think she was still the competent center of her own turbulence. She's preconditioning, I said. Yes. Who would have placed this? Either her side or someone doing her the favor of understanding what she wants without being asked. I nodded once. Then I asked, how fast can we map every donor, consultant, and advisory crossover touching Helena, Pike, the hospital, and the corridor redevelopment line? Her face didn't move. How much do you want me to terrify legal with volume? All of it. That almost made her smile. Good answer. By late afternoon, the map had started taking shape. It sprawled across my conference table in names, committee links, donor overlaps, calendar notations, and old redevelopment memoranda. St. Catherine's expansion corridor was more socially interconnected than financially integrated, which was, in some ways, worse. Money can be traced. Prestige moves through dinners and assumptions. And Helena sat in the middle of more of those circles than I had fully appreciated. Not as a master player. As a woman admired enough to be given quiet pathways, Aaron Pike sat near them too. And my city portfolio, established long before either of them became relevant to me, formed a quiet geography underneath several of the same future-facing plans. That was not theft. Not yet. It was temptation. And smart people often do their dirtiest work in the distance between temptation and action. At 5:12, Claire emailed one line. Do not let her think she successfully stabilized the social perimeter. Interesting. That meant it was time for something small. Not a strike. A correction. I called Sylvia. Yes, that Sylvia. Pearls, perfume, and the moral soul of a decorative knife. She picked up on the third ring, voice already dipped in concern. Evan, darling, I was just thinking of you. No, she wasn't. But performance deserves performance. How kind. How are you holding up? I've heard there's strain. There it was. The word Helena had probably wanted in circulation. I stood by my office window and looked down at the street. Actually, I said, very mildly, it's more a matter of sequence than strain. That bought me silence. Good. Sylvia loved two things most in the world: privileged access and a sentence she could not immediately decode. I'm not sure I follow. I'm sure you don't, I said, but if anyone asks, I'd hate for Helena to be reduced to a tired, overworked wife in a difficult season. That would be unfair. Another silence, longer this time. Because now, Sylvia was leaning forward in whatever guilt chair she happened to be occupying, smelling blood beneath velvet. I continued, still polite, still mild. The issue is not emotional weather. It's that she began preparing the legal and social climate of a divorce after crossing a moral line first. I'd prefer not to have that flattened into something sentimental. I stopped there. No affair details. No names. No hospital. No donor boards. Just enough truth to make the cleaner story start sweating. Sylvia breathed in softly. Oh, yes. Oh. I'm not calling to discuss it further, I said. I only wanted to prevent a vulgar simplification. That line was for her vanity. It worked. Of course, she said. Of course. You have my discretion. No, I didn't. What I had was her appetite, which, in this case, served the same purpose. By 6:20, the perimeter had shifted. Naomi confirmed it when she came into my office carrying updated notes. The donor chatter is changing shape. I looked up. How? Less concern for Helena, more curiosity about chronology. There it was. That was all I wanted. Not public humiliation. Just the right question replacing the wrong one. Not, is he overreacting? But what happened first? That question ruins elegant lies. When I got home, the house was dark except for the entry light. At 9:14, the front door opened. Helena stepped in carrying overnight things. Not much. A garment bag, a tote, the visible minimum for a woman trying not to admit she no longer lived where she had always entered without thinking. She froze when she saw me in the dining room. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You're home." Yes. She set the bag down by the staircase. I need more things. Take what you need. Her eyes narrowed. That's it? Yes. That unsettled her. She had expected obstruction, or hurt, or at least the tension of a man watching his wife collect pieces of her life from a house she had damaged. What she got was clearance, and clearance is colder than conflict. She took 2 steps into the room. You talked to Sylvia. There it was. Fast. Useful. I set my fork down carefully. Did I? Yes. How do you know? Her mouth tightened. Because Marianne called me. Of course she had. Somewhere across the city, women like Marianne made calls, tightened circles, tried to locate the leak before admitting the story itself smelled wrong. I leaned back. Interesting. Don't do that. Do what? That smug little thing where you act like every answer tells you something. Helena, I said quietly, every answer does tell me something. That landed. She crossed her arms. What exactly did you say to her? Nothing untrue. That is not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Her face cooled. So now you're seeding things. I almost laughed. That word from her, as though she had not spent the last 2 days doing exactly that. No, I said. I corrected a tone problem. She stared at me. Then she shook her head once, slowly, like a surgeon disappointed by a patient refusing obvious treatment. You are going to burn this down. There it was again. The projection, the narrative frame. I looked at her and said, I'm not the one who lit the first match. That silenced her. Not because the line was dramatic, because it was too clean. She turned away first and walked into the kitchen. I could hear cupboard doors, the soft clink of glass, the familiar sounds of her trying to inhabit the house like it still answered to her. Then she came back holding a glass of water and stood in the doorway. There was tiredness in her face now, real tiredness. And beneath it, anger, operational anger, the anger of a plan going off rhythm. You think you've cornered me, she said. I looked up at her. No, I said, I think you cornered yourself early and counted on me to stay soft long enough not to notice. That one hit harder than most. She stood there without speaking. Then she asked, what happens when the hospital hears about Aaron? Aha, there it was. Finally, not if, when, not whether that matters. What happens when? I kept my face still, because this was the first truly valuable sentence she had said all night. The hospital mattered. The overlap mattered. Aaron mattered in a way larger than romance. And Helena knew it. Why would the hospital hear about Aaron? I asked. She laughed once, bitter and exhausted. Please, don't insult both of us. I said nothing. She stepped farther into the room. You already know enough to damage me. No, I said. You damaged yourself. I know enough to stop protecting you from it. That took something out of her. I could see it. Not because she became weaker, because she became more honest. She set the glass down on the sideboard and said, if that gets into the wrong channels, it won't just be embarrassment. I waited. She looked at me and finally said it. Aaron is under consideration for a department expansion role. There it was. The wobble, not just an affair. Not just a donor circle issue. Promotion track. Institutional exposure. Potential scandal. Now the pieces aligned. Helena had not just been protecting herself. She had been protecting a larger ecosystem of ambition. His, possibly hers, maybe both. And all of it had been moving under the surface while she was still sleeping in my bed. I folded my hands on the table and asked quietly, did you think I wouldn't find that? Her eyes flashed. I thought you would behave like someone who once loved me. That one almost got me. Almost, but grief that arrives wearing accusation is still manipulation. I stood, slowly, and for the first time since she walked back into the house, I let the full weight of my disgust into the room. I did love you, I said. That's why I gave you privacy, while you turned that privacy into cover. She flinched, actually flinched. Good, because the time for cushioned truth had passed. I took one step closer. You don't get to invoke the marriage now as if you honored it while it was still yours to protect. Her face went pale with anger. You are impossible when you get righteous. No, I said. I'm impossible when I stop being convenient. That shut her up completely. For a second, I thought she might cry. Instead, she did something more revealing. She picked up her tote bag, turned toward the stairs, and said, I'm taking the rest of my things tonight. That was a tactical retreat. Good. She was halfway to the stairs when I said, was the corridor board role part of your future with Aaron? She stopped, one hand on the banister. Back to me. Stillness. A whole confession in the shape of a woman not turning around fast enough. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. Not everything is a scheme. I smiled without warmth. No, I said. Some things are just convenient enough to become one. She stood there for another second, then went upstairs. At 9:52, Claire called. She started, I said. Claire did not sound surprised. Good. This time I understood her definition. Good meant no ambiguity, no false hope, no temptation to preserve softness where the other side had already chosen strategy. What now? I asked. Claire's answer came clean and cold. Now we stop reacting and start setting the pace. When Helena came downstairs with 2 rolling bags, 1 garment bag, and the posture of a woman trying to make leaving look like choice instead of consequence, I was waiting by the study door. She stopped. We looked at each other. Then she asked, "Are you really going to do this?" Do what? You know what. I did. But precision matters. Say it. Her mouth tightened. You are going to use process to punish me. There it was. Not truth to correct me. Process to punish me. Interesting what people reveal when they're close enough to consequence to smell it. I shook my head once. No, I'm going to stop shielding your choices from the systems they touch. That landed hard. She swallowed. You would ruin both of us. No, I said. I would ruin your ability to keep calling this private after you made it structural. The word structural seemed to hit her somewhere deep, because that was exactly what this had become. Not a bedroom betrayal alone. A corridor issue, a donor issue, a promotion issue, a money issue, an integrity issue, and all of it connected by sequence. She stared at me with hatred now, but there was fear under it. Real fear. Not of heartbreak, not of divorce, of exposure at the exact altitude where she had built her identity. You don't understand what they'll do, she said. I almost smiled. No, I said. You don't understand what they'll do once they realize you thought no one else would notice. That broke something in her face. Enough for me. She gripped the handle of her suitcase, walked to the door, and stopped one final time. Without turning back, she said, "You were never the safer man." Interesting. Interesting because it was the first thing she had said in 2 days that sounded almost like truth. No, I said. I was just the man you understood least. Then she left. The door closed. And this time, it did not feel like grief entering after her. It felt like room. The next morning, Claire's draft went out. Not to gossip, not to press, not to the whole hospital. Just to the right governance and compliance channels with oversight relevance to corridor redevelopment, donor sensitivity, and undisclosed personal overlap affecting current review structures. No adjectives, no scandal language. No emotional framing, just sequence, just enough. By 11:40, Naomi had the first confirmation. A review was quietly underway. By 1:15, Aaron Pike's expansion consideration had been temporarily paused pending internal disclosure clarification. By 2:10, Helena was removed from one advisory dinner and one donor-facing appearance until overlap questions were resolved. Not public, better internal, professional, code. At 3:04, Helena called 6 times in 12 minutes. I did not answer once. At 3:19, a text. You had no right. Archived. At 3:27, another. This will follow you too. Archived. At 3:41, Claire called laughing for the first time since this started. Well, she said, that moved faster than expected. How bad? For them? Bad enough. And for me? You look disciplined. They look undisclosed. Perfect. That was all I wanted. Not ruin. Correction. By evening, the donor chatter had changed again. No more emotional husband. No more private strain. Now the whispers were narrower and much more dangerous. Timing, disclosure, judgment, conflict. That was how prestige really dies. Not from headlines first. From internal language getting colder. 3 days later, Aaron's expansion review was suspended indefinitely, pending ethics and disclosure review. Helena was not fired. People like Helena are rarely removed cleanly, unless they steal badly or embarrass the wrong board member in daylight. But she was set back, publicly inside the only world she had ever worked hard enough to worship. And that was enough. More than enough. Because revenge, when done properly, should not make you look bigger. It should leave the other person standing in the exact size they tried to make you feel. 2 weeks later, the legal process was underway. Controlled, expensive, quiet. Claire had walled off every part of my premarital city portfolio so cleanly that Helena's side could not even pretend confusion anymore. The file her lawyers missed had become the file that defined the rest of the case. Mine before her. Mine without blur. Mine beyond reach. That was when her tone changed for the last time. Not in person. By email. Subject line. Practical settlement framework. Of course. Attached revised terms. No fight over the city portfolio. No claim on premarital appreciation. No corridor adjacent structures. No noise around hospital overlap. Just a request for speed, privacy, and mutual non-disparagement. I read it once and forwarded it to Claire. Her reply came back in under 3 minutes. She folded. Yes, that was the word. Folded. Not morally, not emotionally. Structurally, exactly where she had expected me to. Exactly where she had laughed about leaving me with nothing. That evening, I went home early. The house was quieter now, cleaner too. I stood in the kitchen where it had started. Same marble island, same pendant lights, same city beyond the windows. And I thought about the sentence that opened all of this. If this marriage fails, you'll walk away with nothing. Funny, because in the end, I walked away with the one thing she couldn't stabilize once the truth arrived. Position, not emotional position, not moral superiority. Architectural position, mine. A month after the first donor whisper, I saw Helena once in public. Not at the hospital, not at court. At a redevelopment breakfast downtown, she was alone. No Aaron, no board cluster, no hovering donors. Just Helena in a navy suit with a coffee she wasn't drinking and the face of a woman who had recently discovered that private decisions can leave public fingerprints. We stopped 3 feet apart. Neither of us smiled. Evan, she said. Helena. Her eyes searched my face for softness. Regret. A wound still open enough to flatter her. I gave her none of it. She glanced down at my cup, then back at me. I heard Aaron's review was suspended. I held her gaze. I heard a lot of things turned out to depend on disclosure. That hit. Good. She looked away first, then back again. You didn't have to do it like that. No, I had to do it exactly like that. Clean enough to survive scrutiny. Cold enough to stop reinterpretation. Precise enough to leave no room for her preferred story. So I said, you mean the way where facts arrived in order? Her face changed, just slightly. Enough. There were 100 things she could have said then. I loved you. I'm sorry. You destroyed more than me. I didn't think it would go that far. Instead, she said the one thing that told me she still understood herself only in fragments. I was trying not to drown. There it was. Still, even now, her life as weather, her choices as flotation. Never the blade, never the hand holding it. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, quietly, you weren't drowning, you were just no longer the only one holding the map. That one stayed with her. I saw it. Because for the first time since our kitchen, Helena did not have a reply ready. She stood there in the breakfast crowd, holding cooling coffee, dressed beautifully, professionally diminished, legally corrected, and emotionally too late. Then she nodded once. Tiny movement. A surrender small enough to keep her pride alive and large enough to mean she had finally heard me. I'm sorry, she said. This time it sounded different. Not tactical. Not enough to heal anything. Enough to bury it properly. I gave her one nod in return. I know. Then I walked past her, into the city. Not lighter. Not happier. Just clearer. That was enough. Because some endings are not fireworks. Some endings are a surgeon who laughed too early, a lover who thought understanding excused sequence, and a woman who discovered that the quiet man in her kitchen had owned the ground under her confidence long before she ever stepped onto it. She thought I would walk away with nothing. Instead, I walked away with my name, my structures, my city portfolio, and the exact kind of silence that makes the other person hear their own miscalculation forever. Her tone changed when the file arrived. Mine changed when the truth did. And in the end, that was the one she could not survive.